Kramer is based on a real person. Larry David had a neighbor named Kenny Kramer who was very similar, barged into his apartment, borrowed things, ate his food, full of weird stories, held random jobs like he sold disco lights and started a karate dojo. When Seinfeld found out that this was a real person, he was like, we need to rename Kessler Kramer. And Larry David was just against it. He was like, if we do this, Kenny Kramer would very much involve himself and exploit the situation.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Kenny Kramer came knocking.
Oh, shit.
And he wanted to play the character himself, which nobody was going to let happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what. You can do it on one condition.
Whatever you want.
I get to play Kramer.
You can't play Kramer.
I am Kramer.
But you can't act.
So NBC paid him a bunch of money to have access to his name.
Just his name?
Just, like, give
Just
us
his
your
name and
leave
like
us
they gave
alone.
him like just some, leave us alone money. And
that happens in the episode in the show.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
hold on.
okay.
So Kenny then started a bus tour.
This is amazing.
He starts a bus tour called Kramer's Reality Tour, where he takes you around New York and tells you the stories parodied in Seinfeld as it happened to him. So like being part of the contest.
I'm out.
Is this still happening? This
Yeah,
is
I
my
think
rich.
so.
This is my rich person pastime. I want to do this.
You wanna do
I
this?
want to just go to New York and just do this.
I'm starting a Peterman reality bus tour. Check it out.
Making stuff is hard, especially in the entertainment world, when there are millions of dollars on the line. We're going to talk about these disastrous, never-ending, and sometimes downright dangerous productions. This is The Shit Show. Hey everyone, my name is Ian. I am joined by Clint.
Hello.
And Ray.
Hello.
And this is The Shit Show. That's a good segue already. Last time we talked about a handful of TV pilots that were reworked before they made it to air. So today we're going to talk about one of the biggest success stories from a nearly failed pilot, the Seinfeld Chronicles.
Oh, thank God.
Was that the original title?
Yes.
Oh,
The
jeez.
Seinfeld Chronicles?
Yes.
Listen, you add Chronicles.
Doesn't make any sense. Like, it sounds way more epic, than it is.
No, but if you add the word Chronicles to any piece that's like already not a chronicle, like Chronicles of Narnia, okay, fine, whatever, sure, that's cool. The only example I can think of that just was shit was when they did the third and fourth seasons of Gargoyles, and they called it the Goliath Chronicles. Garbage.
How do you feel about the Chronicles of Riddick?
Well, I guess you have to ask yourself how I feel about Vin Diesel. If he's not wearing that sheepskin coat, I'm not watching.
You know what? I fucking hate that coat, and I agree with you. I love that coat.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about all the troubles of Seinfeld, from its risky start to its rise as one of the most beloved TV shows ever made.
I
need to do that as the intro and outro now.
You're welcome, everybody.
Somehow I got through the 4 shows, and they weren't the best 4 shows that have ever been made. But now he said this number 13 to me, and I hung up that phone and I was traumatized. I'm telling you, tears came into my eyes. 13 shows, my God, I can't do this. How am I going to come up with 13 shows? This is ridiculous. I said, this is crazy. And I was petrified. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. This thing now is getting much bigger than it was supposed to. I was supposed to be done with this thing. And now I'm supposed to be doing 13 shows. I'm responsible for it. I'm the executive producer of the show now. I'm completely responsible for this thing. This is mine. How am I going to do this? I can't do it. I cannot do it. This is insane. What have I got myself into?
Okay, so before we jump into this, let's put our mindset into 1990. Seinfeld.
I'm already there.
Always.
I'm always there.
Seinfeld was truly bonkers television. There was nothing like it outside of sketch shows and like Mighty Python. It was very, very different.
I'm just thinking of different episodes.
So
That's how good it is. You just think of an episode and you immediately start laughing.
okay, so
It's like so relatable.
why was it so different? The characters are indifferent. They're shallow. They're selfish.
horrible people.
Not heroic. Borderline unlikable. Elaine was an equal character to the other three men, which was kind of rare. She was never written as the girl character, and is not Jerry's love interest. No, will they, won't they, which is just TV, right? Episodes never ended happy. More than likely, they ended up worse.
Yeah, that's true. There were always those moments where like some shenanigan would happen and they'd be like, and then it would like freeze frame on like a bad moment.
Yeah,
like,
then it
was
just got
always-
even worse.
Yeah.
That, again, everybody knows, the show about nothing, and the meta-ness of it, blurring reality with fiction, with real people fictionalized in it.
Right, because like Jerry is a comedian in the show, and
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you go from Jerry to George Steinbrenner, who was a real baseball manager.
oh yeah, the Yankees manager.
So it's all over the map. So to start off, Jerry Seinfeld at the time was a huge comedian. He was a big comedian. He wasn't like the biggest, but he was regularly seen on Johnny Carson and killing it. And because of this, NBC sits down, brings him in and sits down with him. And in this room is Rick Ludwin, remember him, and then Brandon Tartikoff, the Saved by the Bell guy.
Oh my god.
Wait, is this the one that had a crush on his teacher?
Yeah, the guy that wouldn't give up on his teacher, then gave up on his teacher.
Yeah. So hot and cold on that teacher.
So, so NBC wanted to make something with Jerry Seinfeld, but didn't know what. And they asked him, what did he want to do with NBC? So he goes away and he meets up with his friend Larry David, and they decide to, as they're talking through it, what they could talk about or what their show could be about. They realize that they really enjoy their inane everyday conversations and decide that's what the show should be about. And the deal with NBC at the time was to make a 90-minute special. So they have a camera guy just follow Jerry and Larry around and just film some random stuff.
Oh
to
my
kind
god,
of
I just realized it's Jerry and Larry.
Yes,
like
yes,
I don't
Jerry
know
and
why
Larry.
I never thought of that before.
This is going to get really weird because there's a lot of first names that are last names, and I had to write out Larry David every time because then it was like David.
David
It's like,
who?
what? Yeah. So okay, so they just record a bunch of their stuff of them just talking about nonsense. And then they realized that like 90 minutes would be like way too long.
That's why comedians in cars getting coffee are like 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's nice and short,
It's a
right?
great show though.
So
good.
they decided on just doing a half-hour sitcom. So they write this pilot, and it's originally called Stand Up. But NBC rewrites about a third of it to be more conventional television show, and they changed the name to Seinfeld Chronicles.
Ugh. I just got that word. That word is like everybody
it
else's.
is
The word to me is like everybody else's moist.
Yeah. It is a silly word, but also like what business do you have calling that show a Chronicles? Like
Yeah,
there's
it's-
nothing
it
like
seems
that's immediate.
too
It's
big.
too grandiose
Yeah.
for like what the show is.
Yeah.
It, immediately
it's
you're like
pretentious. It's
Yeah,
a
it's
pretentious
totally.
word.
Yeah.
immediately you're like, oh, that's a collection of 15 sci-fi novels.
Yeah.
It's just like that's not what this is.
So I'm a journaler. I keep a journal all the time, and
The Chronicles of Clint.
I was thinking of different names for it, and I was like, I can't do Chronicles. That's bullshit. So it's
The
now,
Clint Chronicles.
No, now it's the Almanac.
That's all. That's like equally pretentious. I just
Oh
have
come
to-
on! It's
I
like the
just-
sports almanac.
I
From
thought you were
Back
going to
to
go with the
Future.
moist adventures of Clint.
the Clint's Moist Chronicles.
Ugh. Oh,
Okay, so Larry David is furious with the studio because of these rewrites, and he has a ton of fights with them. And Larry David, if you want to know anything about Larry David, he's basically George Costanza. He's the same kind of neurotic. He's quick to anger. He doesn't understand people, and he gives up quickly. And so he fights with the studio back and forth, but he gets most of the script back to its original form. So the pilot's written by Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David. Seinfeld plays a fictional version of himself, has a best friend, George, played by Jason Alexander, and a neighbor named Kessler, played by Michael Richards. The pilot is about a woman Seinfeld knows, wondering if she can stay in his apartment while she is in town, and this snowballs into questioning if they are in a romantic relationship. Classic Seinfeld. The coffee shop idea is there, and a waitress that works there is kind of the side character. Weird fact, the set for the coffee shop in the pilot was reused for a Muppets Take Manhattan.
Was it called Monks?
No, in the original pilot, it's like Pete's or something like that.
It's a completely different set.
Yeah, it's completely different set.
Yeah.
Larry David hated shooting it, hated that they changed his script, so he was just miserable the whole time. And Seinfeld thought it went great. And
Wait, so I understand
That
why he
tracks.
would hate. I understand why Larry David would have hate the script changes, but why would he care about filming it? He's not on camera.
I mean, because it's his work, right?
It's a show. Like being on set
it's
is
his stuff.
stressful.
As he said, he was like, I don't care if one line was rewritten by Woody Allen himself. Like, this was not mine.
I see.
And he even says,
So just being on set, being around those like changes,
people
and, like,
changing his words, and
it's got to be okay.
and he just can't stand it, and he's just getting angry about it. And Seinfeld thinks it went great, and
Which tracks with his personality.
yes, Seinfeld is completely
Nothing phases him.
nothing phases him.
Yeah.
NBC actually liked it, but when they showed it to test audiences, they hated it. They found it too unlikable, too New York, and too Jewish.
Oh my god.
Oh, geez. You guys.
So
You guys.
Tartikoff decides it's not worth pursuing, like his teacher.
He's like, I didn't like my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Seinfeld, either. She wasn't that great.
So he just dumps it. On January 5th, 1989, NBC airs the pilot as is to just dump it on the air and get some ratings, maybe make some of the ad money back, right? Mm-hmm. This is the first episode you've all probably seen via reruns or streaming. So it's on Hulu right now. It will be on Netflix soon. So if you watch that first episode, that is basically the episode. But when you're watching it, they've changed the name. So it just says Seinfeld. They added the iconic music. Go ahead.
Just replay the bit from earlier.
And they cut a lot of Seinfeld's stand-up. It was a bit longer than the 22
really? Okay.
minutes. And one of those, he jokes about Kessler's dog. So if you remember the pilot, Kramer Kessler has a dog that comes running, and you never see that dog ever again.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
But there was a joke. Seinfeld was doing one of his stand-up bits, and it was something about his neighbor's dog or something like that. So it related. The conversation about George's buttons, which is the very first scene after he does the intro with the stand-up, the very first scene, he's like, that button is in the wrong place. That very first scene is verbatim in the series finale, when at the very, very end, they get put in jail after their trial.
Oh, right.
And he goes, that button's in a weird place. And it's the exact same lines.
Oh, that's funny.
And then George goes, haven't we had this conversation before?
Yeah.
Goes pretty well when it aired as the Seinfeld Chronicles. Goes well enough that Rick Ludwin, the guy I mentioned before, convinces NBC to bail on a 2-hour Bob Hope special and use that money to make 4 episodes of Seinfeld and see if they can spin this into something better. And by and large, Rick Ludwin is the person that saved Seinfeld. Without him, Seinfeld would not have existed.
God bless you, Rick Ludwin.
The one caveat from NBC to do this was they needed to have a fourth main character that had to be a woman, and more than the usual cliche of a waitress.
That's woke as hell.
Yeah, and they were like, Jerry and Larry were both like, yeah, that's reasonable, right?
They're like, a woman. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, if we have to.
So they write the 4 episodes, and in a meeting with the production company, they give some notes, get back, and this makes Larry David fly off the handle. Like, what? We've already proven ourselves. Like, what are these notes? Me? I don't take notes.
George is getting upset.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That night, he tells Seinfeld that he's done. Good luck.
Oh, shit.
I don't want to be part of this. And he was on SNL for like half a season before he quit because he was just like...
He's just the kid who takes his ball and goes home when things don't go how he wants them.
Exactly.
And he'd be like,
Yeah.
Fine, I'm just going to go home then.
Yeah. And so he's very much that person, and he wanted it his way, and he'll die for his art kind of person. So they have a meeting with NBC, and they tell Seinfeld that they need to abide by NBC suggestions, and the biggest request was to have Jerry and Elaine engaged for the show, as none of the characters were likable. So at the very least, have a relationship be something the audience could latch on to.
Terrible idea. I hate it.
Well, because you know the characters. But like for them, the way they're thinking is like, what the hell? There's this show that they've written all these episodes and they're all mean and they're terrible people.
Yeah.
And but people like relationships, right?
They like romance.
But most importantly, they really just wanted to have a wedding episode, which is, you know,
That's
the big ratings
season
episode.
finale.
Like, oh, the wedding.
Yeah,
know?
you can market a big wedding finale.
Yeah. And even today, Parks and Rec, The Office, they all done it.
Yeah.
It's still the thing that TV shows are like, this is what it should come, like the season finale should be, right? And so they wanted that to
the
be
culmination.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is what NBC tells him, and Seinfeld said no. He was okay with going back to stand-up. He didn't need this.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
like,
I
whatever,
mean, shit.
whatever. Why even bother? This is what we wanted to do. And so NBC backed off, and they let them do what they wanted. And
Nice.
Larry David was like, what? And so he came back.
Yeah. See, TV execs, if you just get out of the way sometimes and just
Yes.
like fucking let people make TV shows, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, you don't know any better.
Yeah.
Like execs.
I mean, they've literally had decades worth of examples of things that work,
worked.
right? And they're in the business of let's just replicate that because that makes money. That's what people like.
Yeah,
they
that's
like to hear
business.
laugh tracks.
You do the thing that worked, and like you mitigate risk.
Yeah, exactly. And this was a risky proposition. So they're working on the 3rd episode, and there's the robbery, and where something wasn't working, and Larry David was trying to figure it out, and he figured out whatever it was. It's pretty vague in this story, but it impressed NBC so much that he figured out the problem that they gave him a bonus and made him an executive producer, and then so he's suddenly like, oh yeah, I can do the show. Yeah, I can do this.
Like he figured out like a logistical problem or a story problem.
It was like both.
Oh, okay.
Like he tells the story. It's very vague.
He was just like, look, I did a thing. They liked it. I got money. It was great.
Yeah, no, but he was suddenly like, oh yeah, this is why I should be doing this. He's like, money.
Oh, money.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Money's great.
Then they renamed the show to Seinfeld after
Good.
another show was already airing called The Marshall Chronicles.
What the fuck was everyone was like super horny for Chronicles in the
Apparently.
night? Like why?
The Marshall Chronicles didn't even
literally
have its own
turns me
Wikipedia
off.
page.
The Marshall Chronicles what?
Didn't even have its own Wikipedia page.
Like that's how much of a non-starter
non-show.
Chronicles
Really?
is.
The Marshall Chronicles? The fuck is that show about?
Nobody cares. So in the summer of 1990, they air the 4 episodes, and it does well enough that NBC was like, okay, we can try this. Let's keep going. 13 more episodes, which made Larry David lose his damn mind.
Because he had to do more work.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, what? Like, how can... I already came up with 4 ideas. Now I'm supposed to come up with 13?
Like, did he not know how TV worked?
Yeah, I know.
Bro.
Seinfeld made a joke. He was like, if Larry had his way, he would have only done the pilot.
So Larry David, he obviously is successful now. He had Curb Your Enthusiasm, right, which is a big hit. And at the beginning of the story, right, that we were talking about, you said, well, Seinfeld was approached by NBC, to come with the show. So he says, I'm going to go talk to my friend Larry. Like, what was Larry doing at that time?
I think he was like unemployed at the time because he had quit SNL.
He quit SNL. Okay,
Yeah.
so he was like just a burgeoning actor, comedian, and
Yeah,
then
he was a writer.
He just happened to be friends with Seinfeld, and Seinfeld's like, I'm gonna go talk to you.
Yeah, they met at a party once earlier before this, and they hit it off because they had the similar taste of humor.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that
Obviously,
Yes.
based on
Yeah.
what they came up with for
It's
the
just
show.
one's the optimist, the other one's the pessimist. So yeah, he was like they've run out of ideas. They've did the 4, and he told Jerry, he's like, turn it down. We can't do this. Like, we don't have anything. And Seinfeld talked him off the ledge, made him agree to do it, to help him do it. And they immediately realized they have no idea how to run a TV show. And so they're like, oh shit, we got to write so many more episodes. So they just start hiring random people, random friends to help write. And one of them, Peter Melman, who Larry David just liked a piece he wrote in the New York Times, just thought it was like funny. Never met him. and met up with him.
Come to think of it, I think I got a call to be a writer on Seinfeld. They were really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
yeah.
So Melman said he was like, oh, sure, I'll give it a shot. And he had never wrote dialogue before. And he went on to write 40 episodes.
Oh, really?
He was like one of the
Well,
biggest writers
shit.
on the show.
That's awesome.
I just love when just like, oh, I don't know, never written TV before, but like roll up your sleeves, give this a shot, see how it goes.
As this goes on, the show is very Jerry and Larry intense. Like, they have these writers who come up with an idea, and they write the basic lines and the plot line and whatever, and then they go through it goes through this whole gauntlet, because after they're done with it, Larry and Jerry just take it to their office, and then they just hammer it out even more. So even though they don't write every single episode, their hands are on every script.
Yeah.
And
Right,
then from
they polish
there,
everything.
yeah, and from there they go to a table read with the cast, and then if something doesn't work, they go back to their office and they hammer out new jokes. And then when it's on set and it doesn't work, they hammer out more jokes. And then when it doesn't work in the editing room, it's just they're in it for the entirety of the show. So as they start making them, NBC is completely baffled by the plots of these episodes. And one of the first episodes they made was the Chinese restaurant, which NBC was just losing their minds.
Which is just them waiting for a table in a Chinese
It's
restaurant.
such a great
the
episode.
whole episode.
Yes. Larry David
And
loved
Elaine
the
is
idea.
like starving, and George is trying to make a phone call.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So David,
Such a good
That's
episode.
like all it is. That's all that's happening.
so David loved the idea of an episode of television of people waiting for a table in real time. Because you think about it, it's like, because you're watching television, it has commercial breaks. You're like, oh man, they've been there for like 2 hours, but it's only a 22-minute episode, and you're like, I've waited for tables longer than that.
But yeah, no, if you go to a restaurant, like how long is the wait? It's like, 20 minutes. Yeah.
You're like, that's
that's
nothing.
nuts.
20
That's nothing,
minutes.
yeah.
Sometimes you go to restaurants, like, how long is the wait? They're like, an hour. You're like, I got time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he loved that idea, but NBC was just like, what the fuck is this? And there's this guy, and he's going, I was reading the script going, am I missing pages? Nothing happens. And so they were so pissed because they were like, this is going to be so bad that people would turn on the television and just start watching, like nothing is happening, and then turn the channel and never come back to Seinfeld, and immediately just say, yeah, I watched this show and it was terrible. And so the bad of word of mouth. And so they were really worried about it. And so to appease NBC, they put in a very mild plot of wanting to eat before a movie starts. So that's the only note that they took from NBC.
That's the ticking clock.
The ticking clock.
It's just
Exactly.
like-
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
They gotta
we've
go.
all been there. That situation sucks. I've been as hangry as Elaine in that situation. Well, and then isn't there like a side bet where he like dares her to go take an egg roll off some table?
Yeah.
Just-
He'll pay
For
her
50
50 bucks.
$50.
$50. I'll put my face in their soup and blow.
Blow.
Well, they gotta get out there so they can see Plan 9 from outer space.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Plan 9.
So NBC was like, oh, fine, whatever, and they let them make it. But they held it back until the end of the season to make sure it didn't bomb the rest of the show. So it's like the second to last episode of that season.
Oh, so they were like, you got to have episodes about something before you bust out the nothing.
Yeah, yeah, okay. The purest of nothing.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, I guess. The day the second season.
Well, it sounds like this show is a great example of how compromise can be successful. I mean, because they're like, we want to do our show our way, and they say, okay, you can, but just get a little story. Like,
yeah.
Okay, and that's one of the best episodes.
Yeah,
it's
one of those classic episodes that is like they made the show, right?
Yeah.
Like people point to that as like that was the pinnacle of nothing, as they always tout the show about nothing, right? As they continue, NBC starts forcing their hand that Jerry and Elaine need to become a couple. They're like, this needs to be a thing. Again, Larry David's like, no, that's not the point, and he's getting pissed. But so to please them, he wrote The Deal. Episode.
Such a great episode.
Yep.
And this is based off of his own experience of attempting to pull off a friends with benefits relationship with the girl he previously dated.
Yeah.
And at this point, the ratings weren't great. So David wrote the episode as the last for season 2 and the entire series. So when the show would get canceled by NBC, they would at least have had their relationship. Like, see, we got the relationship was in the show. There you go. Again, NBC fucking hated it. They were like, "What the hell is this? They're talking about they're gonna have sex, and there's no sexual energy." And
because that is the point, and that's why it's so good.
That's why it's so
exactly.
great.
It's because
a little of this, a little of that.
There's this.
Like,
why can't we have this? And that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so good.
And as Larry David is like, no, it's supposed to sound like a contract. It's supposed to sound like a business deal.
Like there are rules. And then the next scene where Jerry tells George about it at the cafe, where it is just like brilliant. And he's like telling him about the rules, and then
oxygen. I need oxygen.
And he's like. And then he tells him the second rule, and he's like, spending the night is optional. And he's like, well, see, there you just got greedy. Like, he just can't even, fathom in his brain.
His
that,
bit is so great where he's like,
so good.
I know, how does he
I know the least about women of anyone in the world.
So that's where that came from. That was finally them putting Jerry and Elaine together.
Yeah.
But because of NBC's weird airing of these episodes, that was supposed to be episode 12, the last of the season. It ended up being episode 9. And as you watch it, you stream it right now, it's episode 9. So when NBC picked up Seinfeld for a third season, wanting 22 episodes, cue Larry David losing his mind.
Again.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yes. During that hiatus, Seinfeld was touring, doing comedy, and he asked the audience about Jerry and Elaine getting together, and the audience would boo and say no. And because of that, and NBC fucking up the air date and messing up the continuity, because episode 9 they're together and it ends with them still together, and episode 10 they're not together, right? Because NBC fucked that up and the audience didn't want it, it allowed them to just walk away from that relationship. And NBC never mentioned it again.
Awesome.
So it just kind of worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, the fact that they were aired out of order and they're together in episode 9 and they're not in episode 10, it's like you kind of almost don't care because you just assume that somewhere in between those two episodes that shit blew up.
Yeah, and it just went back to normal.
Went south. Yeah.
Yeah. From then on, it was mostly smooth sailing for the show in general. I mean, Larry David losing, it was just going crazy every season. But season 4 is when Seinfeld moved.
You're telling me I gotta make more money?
Yeah, exactly. Season 4 is when Seinfeld moved into the top 30 TV shows on air, so it was starting to pick up steam. The contest episode barely made it past NBC because, and they strategically did this, they never used the word masturbation.
Yeah.
In it.
Smart.
And
I'm out.
Yeah.
So good.
And NBC was just like, God damn it, like they were right. They were like, what are you mad about? And because they just never say it.
Yeah.
And it allowed them to get around it.
Yeah, it was just really strongly implied.
Yeah.
There were a lot of like sexual things in that show that they never explicitly say.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure like network TV, obviously, but then like when you rewatch it, you're like, it's actually makes it better. Like the fact that it's really subtle and you have to read between the lines of like what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the shrink, like
well,
the shrinkage episode.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like they don't say
shrinks?
what it
Yeah.
is. Like they're just
Like
kind
a
of like
frightened turtle.
yeah, like they just talk about it in these like really
Abstract.
like abstract
Yeah.
metaphorical
Yeah.
kind of terms, and it's like it's so good.
And it allowed them just to get away with tons
yeah,
of stuff.
like, whatever the hell.
I don't know how you guys walk around with those things.
So the contest actually, because NBC again hated it, just was like, "What the fuck is happening? What are you guys doing?" Actually, this was the first time that Seinfeld was being nominated for Emmys, and Larry David won for an Emmy for writing that episode, and his speech is so funny. This is the only one he won for the entire series, but he gets up on stage and everybody's all clapping and cheering. He's like, "Yeah, this is great and all, but I'm still bald."
Amazing. Classic.
And
I feel like after two things where they're like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And then like the show's getting more popular. It's like, obviously they know what they're doing. Just shut up and let them do it.
It's resonating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also that year, Seinfeld won, the only year it ever won Outstanding Comedy Series at the Emmys.
Was 90.
93, I think, something like that. Most of the Emmys later on, the actors, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Michael Richards won a bunch. And then a bunch of editing Emmys.
Of course.
Yeah, there you go.
Of course. I mean, have you seen the editing in that show? Excellent.
Well, okay, we'll get to that in a second, actually.
Excellent work.
By season 6, it was the #1 television show in America. Mostly stayed there until its end in season 9. Larry David left the show at the end of season 7, making Jerry Seinfeld the sole showrunner. He was just exhausted.
Right.
I mean, obviously he was freaking out over 4 episodes and he just did 7
seasons.
That level of anxiety is hard to maintain for that long.
Right.
And you can kind of see that's actually when Jenirae is actually in it less, and they stopped doing the stand-up bits at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because he was just like, I'm busy.
Yeah.
And so it's not as focused on him as much. Yeah, Larry David was just exhausted, and he had hoped that everyone else felt the same way and was like, let's stop together.
Yeah.
Oh, like he would leave and they'd be like, well, guess we're done.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody else was like, no, let's keep going.
So he was walking. I was like, "All right, good job, buddy. Wait, you
Nobody's coming?
not coming? You staying? You sure?"
I'm going.
Yeah.
Doing that like slow walk out the door. Peeks back in the room.
Yeah, the show was a lot of work, as I said. Like their hands weren't just everything, and it was exhausting. They worked 7 days a week, and it was for just weeks on end. All the actors were like, "Oh, it was the easiest job in the world." And it was 2 weeks on, 1 week off. But Larry David still stuck around so he could voice Steinbrenner.
Oh, what? What?
Yeah, he's the voice of Steinbrenner.
You fucking kidding me? I didn't know that at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now that you say it, like, of course. Sounds just like Larry David.
Come on, George.
George, you gotta give me one of those calzones, George.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
You can actually there's actually a couple of scenes where he's in the background, or like something will happen and you'll hear like an audience.
Yeah. There's that episode where Kramer moves to LA and they think that he's like a serial killer.
Yeah.
And then he like opens the door to his apartment and there's like police and like news and like Larry David is
He's,
like,
like,
in the
dead
hallway
center.
like, hey, like looking and like he's one of the guys in the hallway.
Oh,
Yeah, but
my
he was also in like one of the earlier episodes. He was like just a patron in the background. But then there's like when you hear like crowds yelling random stuff, you can always hear Larry David's voice in there.
It's very distinct.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised you didn't know that was him.
I did not even
Yeah.
pick that up like
Yeah.
at all.
So the last kind of shit show-ness of any of this was the second to last episode, the Puerto Rican Day.
Oh, the parade.
The parade
One,
where
yeah,
Kramer accidentally sets a Puerto Rican flag on fire. This caused an uproar among the Puerto Rican community. They were so pissed.
That's fair.
And they're like, why are they? It wasn't a joke at their expense. It was a joke on Kramer. And Seinfeld explained, he was like, and it wasn't even. We were just trying to think of just the most fun parade that could be happening in New York because all the time the episode is about traffic, and they were
Right.
like, there's tons of times where New York is shut down because of a parade, and we just picked one.
Yeah, it was like they're just trying to pick like what's a really random parade that we can choose
Yeah.
just to highlight. Yeah, because the episode has really nothing to do with like the Puerto Rican part of it. It's about like they all keep trying to game the traffic system and then get more and more behind by trying to game the system.
Exactly. It was the most expensive episode they made, and NBC, because of the controversy, they had to pull it from being rerun until many years later.
Right.
Shortly after the finale, that was the second to last episode. Then there was the finale. Seinfeld was filming his stand-up special, I'm Telling You for the Last Time. There were protesters outside the theater with signs like Seinfeld is a racist. And it was getting so bad he was getting death threats and required police escorts to and from the theater because it was just like insane. And on the last night, Seinfeld like came out of the theater and just walked up to the protesters and was like shaking their hands.
It's a ballsy move.
As ballsy.
Yeah. Larry David came back to help write the finale. Aired May 14th, 1998, and 78 million households watched it. It was like the 6th highest viewed television show. This is probably the most disliked episode of the entire series.
That's that's the general consensus. You talk to anybody about Seinfeld, like, oh, such a good show. The finale sucked.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's those two go hand in hand when people are talking about Seinfeld.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's not my favorite episode by any means, but I also understand that like thematically how it makes sense because it's all about like they finally get their comeuppance.
Yeah.
For just like all the horrible shit
Just
that they
being
did,
shitty people,
just
yeah.
being like shitty people. It's finally like, oh, there are repercussions like to their actions, but it also it seems like very like outside the norm of the regular show.
That's what Seinfeld thinks it was. He thinks that it was much bigger. It was a much bigger, grander story than that they've ever done.
Yeah.
And it felt more like an event episode. And that he's like, I think people weren't ready for that. And he that's what he thinks was wrong with it. There was a kind of round table and they were kind of saying essentially like everybody had written an episode in their mind, and there's no way anybody was going to hit all those marks, right? It would have never been as great as everybody else wanted it to be. And most series finales do kind of shit the bed, and a lot of series do it because it's just kind of hard because everybody has what they want to see.
Yeah,
and,
you've lived with these characters for such a long time, and you've like grown to love them, and like how do you end it?
Yeah.
And people have all these expectations, and like especially Seinfeld, like how do you even end a show like that? Like what would have made sense?
There is actually a really great Wisecrack video about why those shows fail, and it has actually a lot to do with life and death. And they're talking about how you live with these characters, and if they're going to go away, you kind of want to see them to their end. And like shows that actually go that extra mile of going to the future and seeing how they end is kind of the most cathartic way to get people to like your finale.
Oh my God.
So 6 Feet
like
Under
Parks
does it.
and Rec.
Parks and Rec did it. Veep did it.
Right.
And
The real series finale of Scrubs did it.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's on the sheet. Yeah, and people love that.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so because you get a finality to it, right?
Oh, the
Because
Book of Love, where he walks out and it's like playing their lives, like going forward.
yeah, and their
Yeah.
kids and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it was a great video. You should watch
The epilogue of Harry Potter.
it. but there's but I think one of the weirdest part of it is the last episode of Seinfeld is also a clip show.
Yeah.
And nobody likes clip shows.
Oh, clip shows are the fucking worst. I will 100%. This is just for all TV producers out there listening. If you make a fucking clip show, listen, I get why you do it. It's because y'all are like, oh, fuck, we need a vacation, or like we ran out of ideas, or whatever the hell.
It's essentially that.
Yeah.
They just need something to do.
You got to fill time and slap an episode together, and you don't want to write anything, whatever. I will 100% every time skip a clip show. I do not watch them. They are trash. The only good clip show in existence is Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
It is brilliant.
Have you
It's
seen
so good.
So how many seasons have they done?
Oh, like
14.
I think I've seen 7.
So in one of the later seasons, they do a clip show, but it starts out as a clip show, and Jenirae was like,
I was
skip
like,
it. I'm like, no,
fucking
I've heard
skip
about
this
this.
clip show.
And it turns into they start misremembering things, and they
awesome.
start fucking with their memories. And so like Charlie starts seeing a memory of him and the waitress, but then Charlie's also standing there watching them. And he's like, wait. And then it comes back from the flashback, and they're like, wait, Charlie, why were there 2 of you? And then it just gets weirder and weirder.
And then there are just 2 Charlies in that episode because he like willed himself into existence a second time through like watching his own flashback.
That's awesome.
And to tie this all together, it has a very classic. They're like, oh, remember when we did the contest? Oh yeah, the contest when we stopped masturbating. And then it does a shot for shot moment of them watching the naked girl from Seinfeld, of them standing at the window, and Charlie comes in as Kramer goes, I'm out. And
they do that scene from Seinfeld. It's
That's
so
awesome.
and then it
good.
comes back, and they're like, wait a minute. They're like, oh, that was a great moment. And they're like, yeah, do you remember living in New York? Yeah, it was in the mid 90s. Oh, when we were in high school.
Like,
and so it just fucks with the idea of what a clip show is.
right, and like reality in their memories, but also it's like it's so perfect because we talk about this all the time. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is Seinfeld.
Yeah, just with way worse
It is
people.
the modern Seinfeld, but with way worse people. Because it's 3 guys and a girl. It's about nothing. They get into like arguments about bullshit, and they're horrible, fucking horrible people.
Yeah.
Like,
And it always ends bad for them.
And it always ends bad for them.
And it's
they
just
can't
way more-
ever get ahead.
They just can go the extra mile of going really crass and really charged subject matter.
Right. They can just go a lot like darker and more fucked up places because they're on FX. But like it
Definitely
is
built on the shoulders of Seinfeld.
absolutely. Yeah. And so
That's a good parallel. I haven't thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
anyway, that clip show is the only good clip show in existence of television.
Turns it on its head.
The rest are straight trash.
Okay, so Seinfeld ends, but in '98, NBC, when they were working on the final season, they offered Jerry Seinfeld $100 million to do a 10th season. That's $5 million per episode, which to this day would still be like the biggest payday for any TV star.
Jesus.
Wow.
And he said no. He was like, I'm exhausted.
He was like, I have so much money.
He has so much money. He's like, I didn't have a family, and he wanted to walk away from it. And they were like, we could continued this quality, but why not just go out on a high note?
Yeah. How would it be to feel good about walking away from $100 million? Just to be like, you know what? I don't really need that. I don't really need that kind of money.
So
Can you imagine?
okay,
I mess with myself all the time and think like, what would I do if like just money was no object? Like, what would I do if I just had all the money in the world? I would ransom my grandson back, but then I would.
Nice callback.
Thank you. Having that much money, just like it does not compute. It does not compute.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Let's get into the money amount. Okay, so syndication. what everybody knows as reruns. When you watch a television show on whatever network you're watching it, whatever TV show you're watching these reruns. So syndication is the goal of TV. Once a show has finished its run, generally they want to get to 100 episodes because that's generally when you can start selling syndication. Syndication is you sell it to different networks. Now, that doesn't mean Fox and then TBS. That syndication is actually more along the lines of Channel 13 Fox in Utah versus ABC in Delaware, wherever it is. All of those are different markets, and they sell them every year, these rights to all these different stations. And that money adds up to a lot. So by 2017, Seinfeld, the show, was worth $4 billion.
Oh,
and to give you an idea of the cycles of syndication, Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld can make upwards of $400 million for these syndication sales.
A year?
The cycle. So that could be a year. It could be a syndication could be like the agreement could be 3 years. It could be 18 months, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So within a year, it could come around to like 400 million.
Jeez.
Just all the time. So it's just constant money coming in. So every time you see an executive producer credit, that is why people make television shows. J.J. Abrams did the first episode of Lost and then walked away.
right.
But because he has his name on the executive producer credit, and that show luckily became a hit, and it gets in syndication, he just gets money.
He just makes a shit
just
ton of
makes
money.
Yeah.
And you just see this all the time. Big names, part of television shows, just at the start of it, so they can just get that money.
Get that money.
Yeah. So
Get that paper.
yeah. So each time an episode airs, producers and royalty holders get just a little bit of money for this. One of these people that makes a shit ton of money from Seinfeld is Steve Bannon.
Oh, gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he bought partial royalties on Seinfeld, so he gets a
Boo.
shit ton of money from it.
Well,
I threw up in my mouth a little bit.
yeah, why you gotta ruin Seinfeld
Sorry.
for me, bro?
Netflix paid over $500 million to get exclusive streaming rights starting this year. So it was on Hulu, or it's currently on Hulu, but
Yeah.
it will be moving over to Netflix for 5 years. They paid $500 million
Jesus
for
Christ. So what? So we gotta watch Seinfeld again. Is what you're telling me before
Yeah,
it moves
before
over
it
to
goes.
Netflix? Because I was thinking of canceling my Netflix subscription because there's nothing good on there. But now I'm like, what if I want to watch Seinfeld again?
All right, some random quick facts. As the series went along, each episode would end up being 30 minutes or longer, and each of those shows needed to be 22 minutes.
Yeah.
So that required a shit ton of cutting. Like they had to cut out so much.
That's
to
why
make
all
that
those
work.
editors got so many Emmys.
Yeah, because it's surprising that any of it makes sense.
Yeah.
To let off steam, Jerry and Larry, when
Good
they
old
were
Jerry and Larry.
just completely wrung out, they would race each other home through the canyons of around LA. And what they would do is Larry would go, he had like a sob or something, and Jerry would give him a 3-minute start. And Larry would try to get home fastest. And then Jerry was in his Porsche and just cruise past him doing like 100 miles an hour just in these canyons. And he was like, I don't know why we were doing this. We were putting our lives on the line. Like the whole show would have been ruined if we died, but we just had to do this. And it was just this weird fucking thing that they did. This adrenaline junkie thing that they just to get rid of the stress. I don't know how that's more stressful, but
Dude loves his cars.
yeah, that's true.
Rich people's pastimes.
Yeah.
They're just very different from the
What
rest
would your
of us.
what would your rich person pastime be, Ray?
Oh, shit. I don't know. It would not be racing
Madison.
cars through windy canyons, though, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
That sounds dangerous.
Okay. The first episode with Frank Costanza was season 4, episode 22, the handicap spot, and
Jerry Stiller.
Frank was played by 78-year-old John Randolph.
Oh, that's right. He's like, it's a different dad for
No.
like,
Jerry's dad is different, and they in the first season or two or something
okay.
like that, and he's just recast later on. Randolph did this one episode, was not at all over the top. He was meant to be very meek. He was very beaten down by George's mom, who was written as the de facto boss of the house. But however, Larry and Jerry wanted someone more lively and physical. So for the fifth season, they got Jerry Stiller. And because he was such a hit, they went back and reshot his scenes in the handicap spot for syndication.
Oh, that's amazing.
So you never see John Randolph. But it is kind of a little weird because they kind of progressively make him crazier as they go along.
Yeah.
And so his first when they brought him back, when they did that reshoot, he's already on the crazy mode. So when you see him for the first time, they technically had Jerry Stiller. He's much more subdued.
That's interesting.
Kramer is based on a real person. Larry David had a neighbor named Kenny Kramer who was very similar, barged into his apartment, borrowed things, ate his food, full of weird stories, held random jobs like he sold disco lights and started a karate dojo. When Seinfeld found this out.
Such a good character. Just like such a unique character.
Just bizarre, right? Just a weirdo. When Seinfeld found out that this was a real person, he was like, we need to rename Kessler Kramer. And Larry David was just against it. He was like, if we do this, if we did that, Kenny Kramer would very much involve himself and exploit the situation.
Yeah.
And Seinfeld would like, no, Kramer, that is such a perfect name.
Yeah.
He's like, it just fits his personality to a T. And sure enough, Kenny Kramer came knocking.
Oh, shit.
And he wanted to play the character himself, which nobody was going to let happen.
Yeah.
So NBC paid him like a bunch of money to have access to his name.
Just his
And
name?
just, like, give
Just
us your
his name and
leave
like
us
they gave
alone.
him like just some leave us alone money and some extra little
Oh my
perks.
God. And that happens in the episode in the show.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
hold on.
okay.
So Kenny then started a bus tour. Now that he has this money that it says he's part of the show, right?
This is amazing.
He starts a bus tour called Kramer's Reality Tour, where he takes you around New York and tells you the stories parodied in Seinfeld as it happened to him. So like being part of the contest, he was part of the contest with Larry David.
Is this still happening? This
Yeah,
is
I
my
think
rich.
so.
This is my rich person pastime. I want to do this.
You wanna do
I want to
this?
just go to New York and just do this. That's what I want to do.
So Kessler, again, that was his name in the very first pilot. And if you watch that first pilot, there is only one moment where Jerry, he's like watching a taped version of a baseball game, and then Kessler walks in and he goes, "Oh, can you believe the Yankees blew it or whatever?" And Jerry hits the floor and he goes, Kessler, why'd you ruin it for me? And that's the only time he says Kessler. So this
And they
was
just didn't redo that.
no, they retcon it in season 9 during the backwards episode when the scenes are going
yes.
backwards, and it just keeps going back further and further in time, and it goes to the first time that Jerry met Kramer, and he goes, "Oh, your name is Kessler." He thought his name. He's like, "Oh, you're Kessler. I saw your name on the buzzer." And he's like, "Oh, no, that's from an old tenant." So they kind of retcon.
That's great.
Like he's
he thought he was Kessler, but he's
Yeah.
actually Kramer. Interesting.
Okay. If any of these stories are ringing a bell or sounding familiar, it's because a lot of this was very much written into the TV show.
Yeah.
The entire TV show arc, discussing making a show about nothing,
Yeah.
pitching a TV show
To NBC.
to NBC, airing one episode with random people, Kramer wanting to play himself, running a tour bus,
Yeah.
like all of that.
Oh yeah, shit.
Doing the Peterman stories.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they buy. That's right. Because they basically give Kramer money. They're like, we're gonna pay you for your stories to like use in the thing. And then he's like, I've got a lot of stories. And so then he like buys Peterman stories. And then he's like, Peterman stories are no good. You got to like, and he tries to sell them back.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just they were just like, oh, that happened. Okay, cool. Write it into the plot, and that's again when you're talking about that blurring of reality and fiction.
Yeah. But yeah, like even the part that you were talking about where Larry David was very much like, no, this is the show and this is how I want it to be.
And he storms out of the meeting.
Right, and he storms out of the meeting and all of that. And like Jerry's more like, well, all right, yeah, we can kind of write. Like he's trying to do the compromise you were talking about because he wants to get the thing made. And George in the show when they're pitching it is like adamant that it's about nothing. And they're like, but what do you mean it's about nothing? He's like, it's about nothing. Like, and he just wants it to be exactly how he wants
pig-headed as Larry David.
Yeah. And doesn't he get mad at a table read because like
they're doing it a little differently.
Differently than
And Kramer being like, no, I mean, I'm Kramer. Like, it's got to be me. And he's like goes with the actor to like teach him to be Kramer.
Kenny Kramer has a Wikipedia page.
Yeah. And it goes
how
through...
much is that tour? I just like need to know how much this costs.
Oh my goodness. On June 6, 2013, Kramer became an ordained non-denominational minister of the Universal Life Church World Headquarters. I just did that. I'm a minister with the Universal Life Church.
You're basically famous.
I'm basically Kramer.
You're basically Kramer. You're going to start giving bus tours.
I wish I was 1/10 as interesting as Kramer.
Oh, I know, for real.
That guy has lived a life.
So, worth it?
Yes. I mean, what? Don't even ask that.
Stop it.
I don't think a day goes by where a Seinfeld quote or a joke is not mentioned in my household. Like it's every day. I remember growing up as a kid and this show being on the air and just my family loving it. And I've probably seen every episode at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like
it's everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, right, you'd sit down like Sunday nights and your Sunday shows, it was like there was a lineup and it was like Simpsons, Seinfeld. And it was always on at like 6:30 or whatever on Fox. And so I probably saw every single episode like randomly out of order just watching TV as a kid. And then later when it started coming to streaming services, I sat down and watched the whole thing start to finish. And then we watched the whole thing start to finish again. So yeah, I've probably seen every episode like 3 or 4 times too.
And it's
so good.
It hasn't gone away and it's not going away. You talk about like other classic television sitcoms that, you know, that they were maybe in syndication. You can maybe catch one here or there, you know, for whatever reason. But Seinfeld is always on and it's always talked about. It's just the staying power of that show. And like you said, like it's Always Sunny. It's like they've taken what Seinfeld does and just did their version of it. Like it's changed the way how everybody does television.
Yeah, like it changed sitcoms. And like we were talking in the last episode about how it has a laugh track and you don't remember that about it because it doesn't feel like that type of show.
It's a unconventional
it's so good.
Conventional sitcom. You know, we got the laugh track element of it, but there's not the will they won't they element.
Right.
And they make fun of that in a way because then after
it never gets serious.
Yeah.
Other than maybe when the plane is starting to crash in the last episode, like that was the only time that where things like seem real.
Yeah.
Like
outside of that, it's just all lighthearted nonsense.
Well, and like even like there's a whole freaking like arc where George's fiance dies, and it is like treated with just like the same level of as if like you lost your job or like a minor like life crisis, right? Yeah. And it's like mostly an inconvenience for him, and so they just like there's like this dark subject matter, and it's just like the flippant way in which they react to it. But like that's why it's so funny. It's so good.
Definitely worth it.
It is 100% worth it.
I think this is a pretty good list, considering it's our last list, and the category, Top 10 Things I've Always Wanted to Say to Dave. Number 4, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for letting me take part in another hugely disappointing series finale.